The first passenger train from Kyiv arrived in Kherson over the weekend after more than 8 months of Russian occupation. There were emotional moments of reunion like this one as hundreds made that 11-hour journey. Re-establishing this rail line is one of the first steps in rebuilding Kherson, and so, of course, is delivering much-needed humanitarian aid, which is what crowds of residents were gathered to receive in the city's main square this weekend. The United Nations sent its first humanitarian convoy into Kherson shortly after Ukraine regained the territory last week. Denise Brown was part of that mission. She's the UN's resident coordinator in Ukraine and a Canadian. Denise Brown, nice to see you this morning.
Thank you.
There are some reports that Russian missiles have hit an oil depot on Saturday, and Ukraine's deputy prime minister has said that the country should begin a voluntary evacuation from the newly liberated area in Kherson. I wonder how concerned you are about residents there right now.
Well, we're extremely concerned about the residents of Kherson. Since we were able to go last week with emergency supplies, we saw the situation up close. The city is still mined. We heard mines being detonated all day long. The city was without any power, no water, no food supplies, no medical stock. So it is really a very, very difficult situation for the population of Kherson right now.
And the fact that there are more missile attacks, what does that tell you about people who had perhaps thought about going back or people who are trying to recover?
People will stay or go to places where they know that they will have shelter. It's extremely cold here right now. It's -2 already, snowing heavily, where their children will be safe, where they have access to food and to medical supplies. So, we are anticipating that over the winter months from many different places that people will move within the country to find the essentials and take care of their families.
That is something I know that is on the mind of so many people is winter, and as you say, already getting colder there. What is the greatest need through these next number of months for people to survive a very difficult winter?
Well, start with energy, electricity, heat, a warm place to live. There are 6 million people in this country who've been displaced by the war. Hundreds of thousands live in what we call collective centers. Basically, could be a university, could be a school, could be an institution, which are not prepared to accommodate those people. So there's a real rush to ensure that, we all do collectively what we can to ensure that people are warm and safe in the coming months.
What are you and your team most focused on right now? Is it the region of Kherson, or is there another part of Ukraine that is perhaps not getting the headlines it deserves in terms of a dire situation?
Well, I wish I could tell you that we had just one focus, but we don't. Yeah. Kherson, because people are in an absolutely terrible situation, but also Kharkiv, where the war raged for months and people's homes have been destroyed. We know that the areas are contaminated by mines, so people will be looking for shelter. So we're juggling, those two massive areas, but also places like Zaporizhia. So we have a number of geographical priorities, but also the priorities people who are in these newly accessible areas, but also those who are displaced by the war and need to ensure that their families, again, I keep saying it, are warm and safe over the winter months. So it's many, many priorities at one time.
How dangerous is it for your team right now? You talked about mines a number of times now, and I know that is obviously a huge concern and puts your team at risk as well. So how dangerous is it for you to do this work, to try and get humanitarian aid in?
Well, there are a lot of risks. And when we went into Kherson last week, there were mortars on the side of the road. Again, all day long, the mines were being detonated. So there is a capacity to demine in this country, but because of the extent of the mining that is believed to have taken place, the capacity needs to be reinforced, additional materials, additional supplies, training, and so forth. So we're careful, but we also have to reach these people. So it's a delicate balancing act, to be sure.
You are Canadian, and I know that Canada has the world's second largest Ukrainian diaspora. There's lots of strong ties between Canada and Ukraine. What is your message to Canadians who are watching this unfold 9 months in, and perhaps also feeling a bit of fatigue with hearing this terrible news day in and day out.
Well, my message to Canadians, all Canadians, is think of the people who got caught up in a war, who lost their homes, who don't have access to electricity, who don't have access to heating, whose children are not going to school, because we know that 30% of children in this country are not able to go to school because of the war. And I don't think any of us have the luxury of being tired of this war and the impact on Ukraine. It behooves all of us to continue to support this country.
What do you think is, what has impressed you or surprised you about the Ukrainian people? I've talked to a lot of them this way, obviously, since it started. They do seem to be a very resilient country, but what has struck you about them?
Well, the air sirens go off almost every day in Kiev or any other place in the country, and often the missiles do strike. But despite that, when people go to work, the restaurants open. They close when there's an airstrike or a siren goes off. So it's a way of working around the war to ensure that their families have some kind of normal life. I think that's the most surprising thing to me.
Denise Brown, you're doing really important work there. Thank you for making the time for us. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you.